All right, so we're in the community of Douglas, which stood just at the crest of the Black Fork grade, and coal trains coming from Elkins and points beyond, heading toward Cumberland, reached the top of the Blackwater grade here. Now, this was one of the most intensive pieces of railroad in the United States, certainly in the eastern United States, but even compared to some of the places out west that had the high mountains and the steep canyons, this was some pretty serious business here, just in terms of the level of workforce and infrastructure that went into getting the coal trains up the mountain. A coal train would arrive in Hendrick with perhaps one or two locomotives. That was enough for the relatively level grade beyond there. But in Hendricks, helper engines would be added. Helper engines were engines that were just designed to be with the train for a short period of time to get over a rougher or steeper piece of track that warranted it. And so the helper engines would be coupled into the train at various points throughout the train. They wanted to spread the power out so that you didn't have a bunch of engines pushing on the back or a bunch of engines up front, spreading the weight out, but also making sure that the forces were distributed evenly throughout the train so that the train didn't suddenly, bunch up or even pop loose like a snake. So, because this grade was particularly steep, coal train required a locomotive for roughly every 10 coal cars. And that meant that for an 80, 90, 100 car coal train, you might have 7, 8, 9, 10 locomotives moving up and down. So those trains would come up, crest the grade here in Douglas, and pass through town. That required a lot of coordination between the locomotive engineers. It also kind of set the tone for what the character of life here was like in Douglas. And we've talked to people who grew up here. Most of the time it was a quiet little town, but most of them knew what time the trains came through. They knew the train schedule. Most of the time the trains operated on a regular schedule, and they could tell what time of day it was by when they could hear the train miles and miles away coming up the canyon. The operation of trains on this grade could be fairly treacherous, and when I say it took a lot of coordination, there was a whole level of skill involved in that between engineers. In the days before radio communication, they had to find other means of communicating with one another. It was fairly common on the railroad to use hand signals, whistle signals, and at night when you couldn't see hands, to use a lantern. And so the way a train crew moved their hand, they could tell one another whether they needed to stop, start, back up, whatever. The same was true of various whistle signals that the locomotive engineers at the front of the train, the middle of the train, and the back of the train. In so doing, by coordinating the brakes and all kinds of things. That's the Blackwater grade. Trains operated here with steam locomotives until the 1950s, and with diesel locomotives until the 1980s. By the 80s, coal mining had declined pretty seriously, so the frequency of trains was much lower. That eventually led to the railroads abandoning